Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. received direct pushback from NBC reporter Brandy Zadronzi during a walk and talk interview she conducted as the pair hiked on the hills of Los Angeles. In the testy interview published Monday, Zadronzi challenged RFK about his anti-vaccine sentiment and accused him of spreading dangerous ideas.
In one passage, Zadronzi, who referred to RFK Jr. as the conspiracy candidate, wrote, quote, "He sees America as a divided place where an elite few conspire to crush the rest, where doctors poison the public, and where few institutions or experts can be trusted. People should be scared," he tells me. It's a dark notion one Kennedy believes that he, as president, can save the country from. So Brandy Zadronzi is one of those kind of, she's like, what is his name? One underscore guy, and another NBC reporter, the kind of social media, Taylor Lorenz-ish,
sure,
commenting on the discourse a lot on social media and bemoaning the harassment and right-wing misinformation, all that kind of stuff. I would say a misinformation journalist, policeman type person.
Oh, Ben Collins.
That's who I was thinking of, yes. I put her in that category. So this interview is exactly what I would have expected from her interviewing RFK Jr. Honestly, it was probably mild by her standards, to be frank. Again, this is a theme we're returning to a lot lately, but it shows the lack of, skepticism is no longer considered a healthy norm in the institution of journalism. Someone who is challenging mainstream or establishment notions in the way that RFK Jr. is viewed as dangerous, bad, wrong, conspiratorial, etc. Even this is coming as, again, even as we are finding out that the mainstream assumption about COVID's origins is likely to be very inaccurate.
Yep.
I'm just mentioning sorry for the 10th time not to just keep harping on this, but it
should be harped on. It should be harped on because it's important and it's relevant. Look, this is difficult to say, and I'm going to catch flack for saying this, but here's a true thing that mainstream media people need to recognize, and the sooner they recognize it, to the extent that their political interest, which they shouldn't have, but their political interest is undermining RFK Jr.'s campaign, you have got to stop simply referring to him as an anti-vaxxer instead of challenging specifically the actual views he holds that you disagree with, some of which I also disagree with and I think are scientifically unsupported. But you're sitting here with all of the journalistic support and scientific backing behind you, making these conclusory statements about someone who is himself vaccinated and who vaccinated their kids. So if you're a lay observer and you're watching, say you're one of the 7 million people or whatever it is that watches Joe Rogan, and you listen to that 3-hour interview, and you heard him say that he's vaccinated, and you heard him cite all these scientific studies, you heard him go into excruciating detail about stuff, much of which I would argue is either incorrect or a misrepresentation. And then you turn on MSNBC, CNN to fact check it, and instead of running through in detail of its actual claims and fact checking, they just say he's an anti-vaxxer. How does your understanding of RFK Jr. as someone who himself is vaccinated and who vaccinated his children square with the kind of pat conclusion that he is an anti-vaxxer? Moreover, he said a bunch of other things in the Rogan clip about the toxic nature of heavy metals in the environment and how the PFAS and BPAs and plastic bottles and all of this stuff that we all talk about, that is mainstream, and every good liberal sitting in Westchester somewhere with their metal Yeti water bottle to avoid plastics knows is a thing. So I think you get credibility. This is something that liberals never understand. And when they're talking about COVID, when they're talking about socialism, when they're talking about anything, is if you get credibility by acknowledging the things that your quote-unquote opponent says that are in fact true, conceding the stuff that is in fact reasonable and true, and demonstrating that you have the capacity intellectually to tease out what is factually incorrect and unsupported by science versus what is your own personal propaganda that's being put out there in an effort to undermine a candidate that you happen not to support because he is not the Democratic Party choice.
I also think there should be more attention paid to what are the policy implications? What does he think the policy implications of the things he's saying are? Because frankly, if he has an idiosyncratic opinion about the science of vaccines that I think is inaccurate or other people think is inaccurate, is probably not going to be a make it or break it issue for me in terms of my support, at least compared to, so is he saying he's going to forbid people from getting, does he think the government should forbid people from giving vaccines? I don't agree with that. I'm a libertarian. I don't think the government should get in the way. That would cause me to, that would decline my, I'm not pledging to support anyone, but that would make me less inclined to support it. Is he going to say, I think it should be your choice for the approval process, whatever, but I'm never going to make federal workers, or any worker, whole category of workers, get vaccinated the way Joe Biden said he would? That would increase my support for him.
That's
you see
such a good
policy
point.
implication. They're hammering him on what is his view of a scientific question, but we are choosing whether to make him a important policy implementer, and what he thinks are the policy ramifications of these ideas should be much more important. And you can probably critique him in a way that would make me not actually agree with the policies he's supporting. So do that.
Yeah, Joe Biden is a Catholic who believes in, no offense, Robby, transubstantiation and doesn't believe in the right to choose. But he has separated that from what he's willing to do as the president of the United States, which is why Democrats are willing to vote for him. Now, to your point, Robby, somehow, independent thinker Coleman Hughes, who has, I think, some really good insights on this, made his way onto a CNN panel and largely made exactly that point. Let's take a look at that clip.
That people feel of the government's handling of COVID. And, we know the pharmaceutical industry is the #1 lobbyer. And, the CDC, the FDA, NIH, unfortunately, there's a revolving door and regulatory capture and corruption that's legal, and people feel enormous resentment about how that led to policies that were heavy-handed, and RFK is speaking to that. So Democrats could do one of two things. They can just focus on his really, looniest claims and just dismiss this guy's crazy, or they could come up with a counter-narrative that's like, we care about that stuff too, but we have a better way to solve it.
Okay, is there, I hope this is not offensive, is there a similarly named black commentator that they thought they were getting and accidentally emailed Cole? Because how on earth did he get onto that panel? Yeah, he's brilliant. I love him. I really enjoy his commentary and his writing. He is a independent, interesting thinker, the exact opposite person that I would expect them to get for a panel like that. So I'm wondering if a Booker got fired there. Sorry, that's my conspiracy theory of the day.
Funny. He wasn't the only person on that panel who was offering some kind of measured critique of the Democratic Party and mainstream media's response to RFK Jr. Whatever you think of Scaramucci and the like, several people on that panel were pointing out some key truths. RFK Jr. is likable. RFK Jr.'s name and family has traction with people. RFK Jr. is polling at 20% at the same time that Joe Biden's favorabilities are low, and at a time at which a majority of Democratic voters don't want Joe Biden to run again. RFK Jr., to Coleman Hughes' point, it's not. When you listen to him talk, he says, well, I'm not running on quote-unquote anti-vax. This is not what I'm leading with. It's not central to my policies. What he's running on, and what anyone who's actually listening to him is hearing, is all of the anti-corruption stuff, the desire to undermine the influence of the pharmaceutical industry, including in regulatory agencies, to shut down the revolving door, things that every Democratic candidate should be talking about. But instead, Joe Biden is appointing former pharmaceutical heads to cabinet positions and taking more money from the pharmaceutical companies than anybody else in Democratic primary. And the Democrats on MSNBC and CNN are sitting there with their hands in the air saying, gosh, I have no idea why this guy has traction. It's right in front of your face. And as Coleman says, there's an opportunity for the Democratic Party in the sense of self-preservation to do something about it, to offer an alternative, to acknowledge the people's concerns, and offer another path. But instead, my suspicion is that they're just going to keep saying anti-vax, anti-vax, anti-vax until that word becomes meaningless. It might actually encourage more people to be actually anti-vax and do nothing to get at the root of what is motivating so many Americans to see something promising on RFK Jr.'s campaign.
Right. And again, what does anti-vax mean? Does anti-vax mean there's not going to be any more vaccine mandates? That's your choice. Great. Or does that mean, I'm going to make it illegal to fund or research or do any kind of preventative medicine on these categories, which I think would be bad. What do we mean? Or do we just mean, I think his question about his mercury concern is not up to date and not accurate? Well, then say that. Is that the biggest issue facing the electorate right now? I'm sorry.
Well, what I learned last night is that if you tweet out multiple peer-reviewed studies on the potential benefits of vitamin D and warding off the worst effects of COVID if you take it regularly in advance, that makes you anti-vax.
Right.
It's become one of these terms like Putin puppet, et cetera, that is becoming so broad as to be meaningless. And I'm really concerned about what's going to happen when there are these real potential downstream effects of people having vaccine skepticism to the extent that people aren't getting their childhood vaccines, and measles and mumps and all of these childhood diseases run rampant, as they do from time to time when there are authentic anti-vax movements afoot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, more Rising right after this.